happy today to do our presentation on Common River, a strategy for capacity building.
So a brief background on Common River. It's a US-based 501c3 that operates and implements community development programs in Alita Wando, Ethiopia. Their mission is to empower the community to become balanced, productive, and self-sustaining for others to witness and replicate while honoring cultural heritage and environmental biodiversity. So we used a collaborative approach with this project, engaging key stakeholders to identify organizational challenges and goals. From there, we created an evaluation design to guide us through the process of assessing the organizational performance. And then after the data was synthesized, we developed a series of recommendations to help guide the leadership.
So these are the objectives that we started out the project. There's some key themes that emerged as we went through the project. And as you can see, tools and guidance, the leadership team's focus to make appropriate decisions moving forward with strategic planning. Although we knew at the onset that we wouldn't actually do a strategic plan due to time constraints, we knew that the assessment was, after talking with our key stakeholders, the assessment was the right place to start. Identify viable capacity building strategies that would best empower Common River, or CR, to effectively utilize their current assets that they had to better align their programs and services with their mission and community needs. And best use of available resources, we actually wanted to look at the programmatic and service levels as well. They had CR leadership, we knew after our initial data gathering, they had some really wonderful ideas, many great ideas for some programs to build out their revenue capacity. But the primary research indicated that CR needs to kind of revisit the mission statement, and we'll get into that later on. We actually revisit the theme of missions and community needs often.
So for our methodology, the entire project was mapped in 5 phases using adaptation of MITRE's organizational assessment approach. Primary data was collected via extra interviews, program records, and detailed survey in conjunction with secondary data through a literature review. The initial phase involved a background and literature review. The second phase included interviews and surveys of key stakeholders, along with an assessment of the organization's mission, vision, values, human capital, financial capital, and social capital. Phase 3 enabled us to provide an in-depth analysis of the organizational performance using a variety of models and tools, together with the discovery of community needs there in Ethiopia. The fourth phase facilitated the critical analysis process through an integration of data and insights in order to provide the overarching goals. Finally, recommendations were developed to help leadership make informed decisions and identify capacity building methods as they move through the process.
So we wanted to share with you our kind of baseline research questions. Again, we're revisiting the mission statement in a collaborative process. Our intent was really to use that collaborative approach, not the top-down approach, to honor that is a basic core value for Common River, is bottom-up, inclusive type of leadership. And so these questions were really meant for stakeholders to reflect upon for further discussion and collective decision-making, even after we were out of the project. And these questions framed our research and guided us through the assessment process itself. It was interesting to note also that in the primary data collection, and here I'm thinking about a pretty extensive questionnaire that we distributed, that there was a tendency to, for example, confuse goals and objectives with vision and values, so we wanted to focus on that. We kept coming back to that as well. We also addressed this later on in our recommendation.
So our analysis process included a multidimensional evaluation using the Universalia Institutional and Organizational Assessment Model, or the IOA model. This model served as a comprehensive framework for an extensive critical analysis. In the IOA model, performance is defined in terms of the organization's effectiveness, which is mission fulfillment, efficiency, which is accuracy, timeliness, and the value of the service and program delivery. Ongoing relevance, which is the extent to which an organization adapts to changing conditions and its environment. And financial viability. The model also presents an approach to assessing the three underlying forces that drive performance: the capacities of an organization, its external environment, and its internal context for motivation.
And we also used OCAT analysis that also Jack referred to in his presentation, which is a McKinsey organizational capacity assessment tool. So basically, you flow your data through this model and outcomes to these areas. The scoring on this really represents, first of all, it's 1 to 4 scale, you can see, but it indicates their strengths that they can build on for areas to improve. And of course, those scores are opportunities for improvement. They do have, Common River has opportunities for improvement in the areas of financial management, that was key, board leadership, and program design and evaluation. We'll get into that later. They received slightly higher scores for their policies and procedures at the programmatic level in Ethiopia. They were very detailed, and so these were slightly higher scores on the OCAT.
The SWOT that we developed was utilizing primary and secondary data, of course. And interestingly enough, our own hypothesis proved to be true with the outcomes from the SWOT substantiated results from the other assessment mechanisms. Basically, we can kind of conducted a little experiment of our own within the research and use these different models, and we ended up with the same point as we expected. So for the strengths, Common River upholds a robust, participatory, community-based development initiatives, which is essentially the basis for their existence. A rich history in the town of Elito Wando, stemming from one of their co-founders, along with a significant asset of land, adds to their strengths. The organization facilitates ongoing international cross-cultural exchange between its beneficiaries and volunteers, while adhering to a model of bottom-up development. They also operate a very successful primary education program and generate positive impact to local children's health through nutrition and access to services.
And so I'm looking at the SWOT, looking specifically at the internal weaknesses for Common River, which these were, by the way, pretty much self-disclosed. It wasn't difficult to do the SWOT for Common River. They know that they have a lack of funds, and they know they have capacity revenue issues. And some of the responses to the questionnaire, basically, we were getting responses like, we keep going to the same funders over and over and over. We've got to think outside the box. What are we going to do? How are we going to create other diverse revenue streams? So it's at the very high level for the leadership. They're very aware of that. And so we'll talk about that in our recommendations, because we know that they had also a local staff capacity issues, in the sense that not that many, like they're trying to build out ecotourism, talk about that, with their huts and renting out even some of the huts for the ecotourism, but a lot of staff don't speak English, and they have some issues surrounding that area as well. Another one is they don't have accounting software in place, and that's another recommendation we'll talk about later, where they're using Excel right now. And it's difficult to go to new funders that don't know you and give them an Excel spreadsheet. So, and also they have infrastructural issues at the actual site. They have challenges for water and also clean water as well. And it's a very remote site, so transportation infrastructure is very limited as well.
For opportunities, aside from the community, one of CR's greatest assets is its land. So substantial opportunities do exist from the use of land in farming and agriculture, things like coffee and honey production. CR has also created and implemented an ecotourism program, which has tremendous potential for growth and ongoing revenue. While this and other initiatives, the organization embraces the capability for local and international collaboration in sustainable development, as well as the potential for social enterprise to create revenue. CR can also increase impact by expanding the education program and by enhancing their outreach through community participation.
And then finally looking at external challenges, threats, if you will, which again were determined by the literature mostly and some from the primary data interviews. There are some things that came out. For example, there are a ton of NGOs in Ethiopia, so even if they had, let's say they had their financial picture all ready to go, even at that point, it's still very competitive in Ethiopia to get money. And that was one of the comments actually, restrictions and quote, restrictions and regulations in Ethiopia make the operations of Common River very difficult. So we did see that the Ethiopian government had put in some regulations sort of making it more difficult to operate in Ethiopia. And so we put it here mainly for management or leadership to be aware of that and keep an eye on that politically. Not that they have the capacity to do much, but at least be aware. Climate change is also an external threat. And according to the literature, there's the region where they're located is a big coffee producer area, but the climate change is wreaking havoc in that market for these. A lot of these people are doing subsistence farming, and so that creates an additional layer of challenge for them. And finally, global markets. Not that I'm an economist, but in the literature, Dr. Ira Hama wrote a really interesting article entitled Capacity Building Leadership, Question and Drains of Corruption in Africa. And Dr. Ira Hama bemoans the aspects of failed global economic policies in Africa, and I quote, "Rapid economic and social development has become a challenge as a result of the increased global economic integration and dependence. The gap between the developing countries and the technologically developed and rich nations continues to widen. This is not because of insufficient efforts on their part, but because of certain global and internal forces that are in operation." And then he goes on to talk, end quote, he goes on to talk about the example of Nigeria, who has swallowed kind of the IMF and Development Assistance Agency agenda, and yet these countries are not developing, and that's a huge external threat as well for Common River.
So the outcomes of our analysis led to the establishment of several recommendations, which are categorized under 3 topics: strategic leadership, financial management, and programs and services. Under strategic leadership, we identified board development as an essential and top priority. We are suggesting that CR utilize their existing bylaws and governing documents to further develop the board, including onboarding and/or terming out of board members. Additionally, they should take advantage of a wealth of resources available to nonprofits such as Board Source, Compass Point, and universities like USF. Capacity may also be enhanced by increasing networks and through cross-sector collaboration. Leadership should also review and perhaps reassess their specified mission, vision, and value statements, and make sure they are clearly stated and communicated both internally and externally, as well as ensuring that all programming is in alignment. Lastly, leadership should engage in intentional planning, utilizing input from key stakeholders and results from impact assessments.
And another recommendation, obviously, is financial management. Common River, when we did our expert interviews to the very engaged board members, they mentioned diverse revenue streams, and that's fine. But Tom and I used the analogy of the foundation for the house many times in the project, where you need to start with basics. You need to get accounting software in place. And whether it's accrual basis, cash basis, it doesn't really matter. At a certain point, you need to prove to potential new donors your numbers are good. There is also, the primary data also revealed that there is a little future planning, and how can that be possible? It really can't be possible, because after all, you could be in as many meetings as you want, you can talk about as many programs as you want, but that's not going to be wrong as you know your financial picture. Obviously, they need to adopt and execute an annual operating budget. They need to stick to that budget. And this would they would need to facilitate obviously staff training to accomplish this goal. And they didn't have really you notice they didn't have a fundraising and marketing plan. And so we were, as Tom was saying, we would recommend that they engage sort of pro bono help with that, and engage a CPA to conduct at least an annual audit every year. And then also, we had some recommendations in relation to programs and services. We wanted them to focus on what was working and keep developing what was working with them. For example, they do have a coffee program, and they do grow coffee. They know how to do that. But we recommend that this happen in phases, with the first phase being to focus, like I said, on the things that they're already doing well. The key stakeholders told us that coffee was a program that was in place to create revenue streams for Common River, and according to their website, it's still a program that's operating. And as their geographical area is a major coffee producer, and the people already know how to do this, we thought it was kind of a no-brainer for a recommendation. But to balance the weather condition issue and the climate change issue, we also recommend they continue to develop their eco lodge and ecotourism programs. And we also recommend they explore other non-coffee type of crops and agricultural cooperatives in the region.
And as well expand what's working with the educational program and consider social enterprise opportunities. So a very special acknowledgement and thanks to Donna Silan and Sergey Bekele, the amazing co-founders of Common River, and our remarkable partners throughout this project. Virginia and I are delighted and honored that Common River's Executive Director, Sergey, is here with us today, all the way from Elitawando, Ethiopia. Just answer any questions that anyone might have about the presentation and the organization, and also just provide your feedback on some of the recommendations that we first saw.
Really been a privilege to be here. Came about a month ago. I'm one of the co-founders that was there for the last year working on this program. And when I received this questionnaire from Thomas, I had a meeting with the staff, the teachers, the course with the firm. And it really was the first step for us to sit down and to translate the work. So I really got the impact Thomas was asking for. And that really opened a lot of answers for us, because this was issues that we never dared talk about. You know, it was just all other things. Really busy. And we are really grateful to our University of San Francisco. And last year we had also University of San Francisco medical department students there in the research area, and look forward to collaborating with this. And I'm very thankful to you. Thank you so much.
Any questions? Just a few minutes or a minute now. Thank you.
What would be the first step in implementing some of these recommendations?
More meetings, I guess. And yeah, it's nice to have things written, to-do list, and that really gives us a focus. What is our mission? And it's, you know, I feel like it's not a one-time deal, but it's not really easy to make it part of, you know, everyday life and that. So we work in that direction, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.